Hello, everyone. So for this week, we have the topic of game theory. If you remember last week, we discussed on oligopoly, and we mentioned in the oligopoly lecture that the equilibrium of the market structure depends on how the other rivals are designing their market strategy, how they are going to play, how they are going to set the price and quantity. So we reviewed different models of oligopoly, including Carnot model, Bertrand, and Stackelberg. And in all of them, what would be the best decision or the optimum decision on price and quantity depends on what would be the decision of the other firms, right, in the market. So in general, if you're going to generalize this concept that our best decision depends on the other players' decisions or the rival decisions or others' decision, that's called game theory, right? And the concept of game theory is much broader than the oligopoly market structure. Maybe the famous one and the most interesting one is how in the US, how in politics, they are designing their strategy across the world, right, with the other countries. I mean, foreign strategies, right? So when they are going to decide about something, they actually design a game theory to see what would be the other's reaction and what would be, and considering the other's decision, the other's reaction, what would be the best strategy, right? That's why game theory is very important in economics, because your decision depends to what extent or greatly sometimes on the other's decision, right? So that's why we need to review game theory in this course. So for this lecture, we are going to first review the concept of game theory. We are going to review the terms and the definitions of game theory. And then we are going to review, first of all, simultaneous games when there is only one equilibrium, right? The Carnot model, like the Bertrand model, when both firms, both players, they are moving and deciding at the same time, and there is only one equilibrium. And next, we are going to review different situations in which both firms are still deciding, moving at the same time, but we are going to end up with more than one equilibrium. That includes when players are coordinating with each other, so coordination gains as well as chicken game. And lastly, we are going to review sequential gains like the Stackelberg, when one firm decides first or one player decides first and the other one, after observing the first firm or the first player decision and action, then they are going to decide based on their best reaction. So first of all, in game theory, it provides you with a method to analyze strategic choices, right? That includes that's going to be very important when your choice depends on the other player's choice, which is in general when we have mutual and strategic interdependence, like the one we had in the oligopoly, right? The key assumption here is that each player is still maximizing their goal, right? That goal may include profit, right? If we are talking about the market structure and firms, right? So the point is that it's true that in game theory, every player decision depends on the other player decision, but we still assume that each player is deciding to maximize their goal, right? And this goal in the context of firms and market, it's actually profit, right? But this maximization depends on it's like the others player actions given, right? And we are also assuming that there is for this lecture, we are not discussing non-cooperative gains. That includes, for example, face-to-face negotiation across the players, right? So it's not allowed for the players to do negotiation and to come up with and to kind of perform some sort of coordination. That's not what we're going to review in the context of game theory for today. So the general elements we need for the game theory to kind of design a game and analyze a game is that, first of all, we are going to have at least two players, right? We're going to have two players or more. And then in terms of action, we are assuming player choices of action affect the others. So there is no there is no independency across the player choices. In that case, game theory that we are going to discuss for today, it's not going to work. So we assume each player action affect the other player's action. We are going to have outcomes and payouts as a result of each action. And also we have some underlying rules, including that whether the players are playing at the same time simultaneously like Bertrand and Carnot, or they are playing sequentially, like in turn, like the one we had under Stackelberg model, right? So first of all, before we review more concept in game theory, let's first of all the equilibrium, the famous equilibrium we have in any game theory, it's called Nash equilibrium, and the name is coming from the name of a famous scientist in math, who was John Nash. You probably have watched what was the name of Beautiful Mind, which was a movie on John Nash, kind of a screenshot of kind of part of his life and how he came to Nash equilibrium. So it's kind of a movie. It's a nice one, and it's also describing how John Nash found the Nash equilibrium and discussed the Nash equilibrium. So before we review more of this game concept, let's watch part of this movie. So let me share my screen. So yeah, so this is just part of, a small scene of this movie. And it's kind of trying to describe how John Nash found that there is a contradiction between the previous concept in terms of the equilibrium and the new concept of game theory. So what I want you to pay attention is that how in a game theory you're gonna maximize your profit, your goal, or your utility, and at the same time you need to consider what are the other players' reaction, right? So your goal, your maximized goal or your optimized goal, your optimized utility depends on what is the other players' action too, right? It's not just entirely on your action, it depends on the other player's action, right? So I just want you to pay attention how you must be thinking when you're designing a game theory, as well as how the social benefit, or let's say the social outcome, is not necessarily derived from a game theory when everyone is going to maximize their decision. It's not necessarily compatible with the best for the entire society, right? So that's the second thing I want you to pay attention to. So let me share this one here.
Deep breaths. Nash, you might want to stop shuffling your papers for 5 seconds.
I will not buy you gentlemen beer.
Oh, we're not here for beer, my friend.
Oh. Does anyone else feel she should be moving in slow motion?
Will she want a large wedding, you think?
Should we say swords, gentlemen? Pistols at dawn?
Have you remembered nothing? Recall the lessons of Adam Smith, the father of modern economics.
In competition, individual ambition serves the common good.
Exactly.
Every man for himself, gentlemen.
And those who strike out are stuck with their friends.
I'm not gonna strike out.
You can lead a blonde to water, but you can't make her drink.
I don't think you said that.
All right, nobody move. She's looking over here. Right, she's looking at Nash.
Oh, God. All right, he may have the upper hand now, but wait until he opens his mouth. Remember the last time?
Oh, yes, that was the history book.
Adam Smith needs revision.
What are you talking about?
If we all go for the blonde, we block each other. Not a single one of us is going to get her. So then we go for her friends. But they will all give us the cold shoulder because nobody likes to be second choice. But what if no one goes for the blonde? We don't get in each other's way, and we don't insult the other girls. That's the only way we win. That's the only way we all get laid. Adam Smith said, the best result comes from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself, right? That's what he said, that's right? Incomplete. Incomplete. Okay? Because the best result would come from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself and the group.
Ash, this is some way for you to get the blonde on your own. You can go to hell. Governing dynamics, gentlemen. Governing dynamics. Adam Smith. Who's wrong?
Yep, there we go. Careful, careful.
Yeah, let's get back to the lecture again. So yeah, first of all, before the game theory and before Nash equilibrium, what Adam Smith was discussing was that when everyone in a group, when everyone in the society, they are acting based on their own best, right? So based on Adam Smith, you always need to consider what makes you the best, right? So what action, what decision could maximize your utility, your goal, right? And then if everyone is doing the same thing to maximize their own goal, then when we are looking at the entire society, the collective goal, the collective utility, the collective profit, it's going to be maximized too, right? But what John Nash actually is trying to highlight is that it's not true always. It's not true all the time, right? There are some situations in which if everyone is making their best decision, we are not gonna reach out to what makes the entire society the best, right? For example, in this particular example, he's saying that maybe what would be the best for the entire society is to get the blonde, right? But if the other players, right, including one player, if the other players are going for the blonde, then no one could get the blonde, right? And the others are not gonna, the other girls, they are gonna show the cold shoulder, right? So what makes everyone the best, right? Independent of the other, it's gonna be going for the blonde. That could be the best decision, right? Based on individual interest or individual goal, right? But this is not going to end up with what could be the best for the entire group, right? If everyone is going to go for the blonde, then no one could get the blonde, right? If everyone is going to act based on their own interest, right? Then they're not going to reach out to the group or collective what makes the entire group the best, right? So this is just trying to highlight that if every single player, if every single firm is trying to maximize their interest, is trying to maximize their profit, the entire group, the entire market, they're not going to reach out to what makes the entire group the best, right? That's because sometimes actions, each player action, each firm action could impact the other's player interest or goal as well. So it's as if in your interest function, in your goal function, in your profit function, the other player action is also playing a role, right? So it depends on the other player's action, right? So that's why game theory is getting important. And this is going to tell us that sometimes the outcome of a game, the equilibrium of a game, is not necessarily the social equilibrium. It's sometimes something different from the social equilibrium, which could be called or could be a Nash equilibrium, right? So now let's design a very simple game. It's simple but very useful and very practical in game theory. You can actually design more complicated market structure and based on this simple game, right? So this game, which is called Prisoner Dilemma, it's very important because there are so many complicated issues and problems in economics that could be defined or could be simplified based on this game and could be solved easily, right? So what's the game? What's the Prisoner Dilemma? In the Prisoner Dilemma, we are thinking that we have two robbers. They are both robbing a bank, right? And they are getting away using a stolen car. And the very next day, the police catches them, and they have enough evidence to just put them in jail for 1 year just because of the stolen car. But the police doesn't have enough evidence to support they have committed the bank robbery, right? So there is enough evidence for the stolen car, and each robber would go to the jail for at most 1 year only for the stolen car. But there is no enough evidence to just prove the robbery by either of them. So what the police is doing, what they are doing to just catch them for the robbery and put them in jail for the robbery is that the police, they are going to snitch, right? And they are relying on one of the robbers to tattle on the other, right? So what they do is that the police promises each robber that they're going to go for free if they snitch, right? But the point is that each robber knows that the other robber has taken the same offer, right? So this is the offer that is given to both robber by the police, and each robber knows the other robber is taking the same offer, right? So what each robber is thinking, if I keep my mouth shut, right, then both of us would go to the jail for at most 1 year. But what if I keep my mouth shut, but the other robber is actually snitching on me, right? Then the other robber would go for free, so 0 years of jail, but I would go to the jail for 5 years, right? What if both of us snitching? In that case, each robber, because it's going to be a shared crime, it's going to be a joint crime, then each robber would go to the jail for at most 3 years, right? So let's think about the situation. First of all, we have two players, right? Two robbers. Each player has two actions or two decisions. First of all, to snitch or not snitch, right? So what we are going to do is that if each robber is snitching, then the outcome, the payoff, depends on whether the other robber is also snitching or not, right? So you can see that the action of each robber, the payoff of this action depends on the other player action too, right? So we need to see what would be the action to the other player. So if I'm going to summarize all of these game in a table, then we are going to end up with a table like this one, right? So let's design a table from the scratch, then it might be easier to get what's happening. So whenever you're going to design a table, you need to, first of all, for each table in a game theory, we usually consider, because each table has 2 dimensions. So for this reason, we have usually 2 players only, right? So if we have a game with more than 2 players, you need to kind of summarize it into 2 player, and then you can extend it or generalize it to more than 2 player, right? So first of all, it might be easier to use this one. Yep. And then we are gonna divide it into 2 because we have 2 players. Or maybe this way easier to write down the payoffs only. Right, so in each dimension of this game, we are gonna have the player, right? So I'm gonna put the player or rubber 1, right, on the vertical line. So we are gonna have player 1 here and player 2 here, right? And then how about the actions? Where would be each action? In each action could be written on the columns of these table, right? For example, the first action, the first strategy that player one has is to just blame the other one, right? So snitching or blaming, it's one action, and the other action is to remain silent. Let's show it by S. Player 2 has the same strategies, has 2 options, either to remain silent or blame the other one, right? Now, the outcomes could be written in the table, right? For example, if both player 1 and player 2, they are both remaining silent, right? So if they both remain silent, then each player could go to the jail for at most 1 year. So the outcome is 1 year for player 1 and 1 year for player 2, right? So the first one always is attributed to player 1, and the second one is always attributed to player 2. What if both players are blaming, they are not remaining silent, they are snitching on the other one, then it's going to be a joint crime, and then each player could go to the jail for at most 3 years, right? So 3 years for player 1 and 3 years for player 2, right? What if player 1 snitched, but player 2 remains silent, right? So in this case, the player 1 who is talking on the player 2, it's going to go for free. So the payoff for player 1 is going to be 0. And the player who remains silent, he's going to go to the jail for 5 years, right? So 5 years would be the number of years of jail for player 2. How about this situation when player 1 remains silent and player 2 snitches? In this case, player 1 who remains silent would go to the jail for 5 years, and player 2 who is snitching would go to the jail for 0 years, right? So this is the game, right? This is how we design a game, and every game, even the complicated one, should be simplified on such a table, right? So in some cases, you may have more strategies, more options for each player. In this case, you need to add columns and rows here, right? So this is how the table could be extended. But if you have more than one player, you need to somehow simplify it or put it into 2-player table and probably extend it in the other dimension, right? So now let's see what would be the equilibrium of such a game, right? What would be the best decision by each player, and then what would be the equilibrium outcome of the game, right? To find the equilibrium outcome of a game, what we usually do is that because we know that the best response of each player depends on the other player action, right? So let's kind of take one player action given, right? And then see what would be the best decision of the other player. For example, to find the equilibrium of this game, for a second, let's assume player 2 is going to remain silent. If player 2 remains silent, what would be the best decision by player 1, right? So to find the best decision, we are thinking on the payoff. If under this column, when player 2 remains silent, if player 1 remains silent, then it's going to be 1 year jail. But if player 1 doesn't remain silent, then they're going to go for free, right? So that means the best decision when player 2 remains silent, then the best decision by player 1 is to not to remain silent, right? So this is going to be the best decision by player 1, right? What if player 2 doesn't remain silent? What if player 2 snitches, right? Then what would be the best decision by player 1? If under blame by player 2, if player 1 remains silent, then he's going to go to the jail for 5 years. But if he doesn't play silent, if he play blame, then he's going to go to the jail for 3 years. So since it's about jail, number of years of jail, right? So 3 years is better than 5 years, then player 1 is going to play snitch or blame, right? So player 1 prefers to play blame if player 2 is going to play blame too, right? So this is, the one that I highlighted by red, these are actually the best decisions by player 1, right? So what we are going to see is that regardless of what player 2 is playing, player 1 is going to play blame, right? So keep that here, and then let's see what would be the best decision by player 2. To find the best decision by player 2, we first, for a second, assume that player 1 is going to play silent. If player 1 is going to play silent, what is the best decision by player 2, right? Under silent by player 1, if player 2 remains silent, he's going to go to the jail for 1 year. But if he plays blame, then he's going to go to the jail for 0 years, right? So for sure, he's going to play blame, right? If player 1 remains silent. What if player 1 wants to play blame? What is the best decision by player 2? Under blame by player 1, if player 2 remains silent, he's going to go to the jail for 5 years. If he is not remaining silent, then he's going to go to the jail for 3 years, right? So that means under this strategy by player 1, the best response by player 2 is to play blame, right? So what we can see is that, again, regardless of what player 1 is playing, the best strategy by player 2 is to play blame, right? So the best strategy by both players, doesn't matter what the other player is playing, is to play blame, right? And then you can see that this is, 3-3 or blame is where two strategies are intersecting with each other. This is where the best response function are intersecting with each other, right? So that means since this is going to be when best response function is crossing, then this is going to be the outcome of the game, right? The equilibrium of the game. Both won't remain silent, both would snitch on each other. And this is going to be the equilibrium of this game, which is called Nash equilibrium, right? So this is how we are going to find the Nash equilibrium of the game, right? So you use the same process every single time you're going to find the equilibrium of any game, right? But what was also important in this specific game is that we found a strategy, the blame strategy, to be the best strategy by each player, right? Regardless of what the other player is playing, right? If there is such a strategy for either of these players in your game, then that strategy is called dominant strategy, right? So what you do in a game when you're going to solve a game, when you're going to find the Nash equilibrium of a game, what you do first is that you would see if any player would have a dominant strategy. Because if a player has a dominant strategy, they would play it regardless of what the other player is gonna play, right? So for this specific game, blame was the dominant strategy. It was always the best response, right? Doesn't matter whether the other player is playing silent or blame, right? So since it's gonna be the best strategy, across all of the other player strategy, right? Then each player is going to play the dominant strategy, right? And then when you're going to find the equilibrium, if players have a dominant strategy, you only need to see where these two dominant strategy would intersect. And then the intersection is going to be the Nash equilibrium, right? So yeah, when you're going to solve a game, all you need to do is to see if a player would have a dominant strategy or not, right? And then you need to solve it based on the dominant strategy. Okay, perfect. So let's get back to... what are the real-world examples of prisoner's dilemma, right? So what we discussed is that prisoner dilemma is a famous game in the game theory, and there are so many examples that could be summarized or could be simplified in the context of prisoner's dilemma, right? The examples of prisoner's dilemma in the context of market structure and economics could be when we have price wars, right? Like the one we have in the Bertrand model last week. When two players are thinking to undercut the price over the other player or the other firm, right? For example, if you're gonna just use the same concept of prisoner dilemma, being nasty, it could be just cutting the price on your rival, and being nice is to tactically colluding with your rival and keeping the price at the high level, right? Or under advertising war could be the same. For example, in this case, the strategy that is being nasty could mean trying to out-advertise your rival, but being nice means not to compete aggressively, right? That could be the next strategy. Or under capacity war, being nasty means trying to add capacity before your rival can, but that would be the aggressive strategy you could have, right? For example, when two firms like Esso and Chevron, they are competing with each other, they have two strategies, either to keep the price at the low level or to raise the price at the high level, right? If they keep the price at the low level, then maybe that would be the best for the entire, the best for one firm. If the other firm is keeping the price at high level, but if both are keeping the price at the high level, then the collective profit is going to be maximized, right? But under the game theory, we are going to show that no player, no firm is going to keep the price at the high level. They are going to drop the price, right? So that could be summarized on this table, right? So we have firm 1 and firm 2. Each firm has two strategies, either to keep the price at the low level or keep the price at the high level, right? This is the same for the other player. And then the numbers we have inside the table, these are the payoff, right? So when you're gonna find the equilibrium of this game, first of all, let's assume player 2 is playing low price, right? So if the player 1, if firm 1 is playing low price, what is the best response by player 1, right? So look at the payoff. Under low price by player 2, then the payoff of keeping the price at low level by player 1 is going to provide player 1 greater profit or greater payoff, right? So under low price by firm 2, firm 1 is going to play low price 2, right? What if player 2 is going to play high price? What would be the best response by player 1, right? Under high price, then keeping the price high is going to provide, keeping the price low is going to provide greater profit, greater payoff for player 1, right? So again, player 1 under high price by player 2, player 1 is going to play low price, right? So you can see that doesn't matter whether firm 2 is playing high price or low price, player 1 is going to keep the price low, right? So that's the dominant strategy by player 1, right? How about player 2? What's the best response of player 2, or whether player 2 has a dominant strategy or not, right? First of all, let's assume player 1 is gonna, or firm 1 is gonna play low price. What is the best response of player 2 if player 1 plays low price, right? If player 1 plays low price, then playing low price by firm 2 is gonna provide greater profit for player 2, right? So then player 2 is gonna play low price. What if firm 1 is going to play high price? What's the best response of player 2, right? Under high price by player 1, then player 2 is going to play low price 2, right? So you can see that player 2 is going to play low price. Doesn't matter whether player 1 is playing high price or not, right? So this is also the dominant strategy for player 2. So since both players have dominant strategy, we can get rid of the highest strategy, high price strategy, and then where low strategies are intersecting with each other, that's going to give us the equilibrium of this game, which is here, right? So you can see that despite the collective profit of this market is when both players are playing high price, right? Then in that case, each player could get 60 and the collective profit is going to be 120. But both players are actually playing low and low, right? Just because each player decision depends or impact the other player decision or the other player payoff, right? So yeah, this is how we can derive the Nash equilibrium for each game.